Germany, France, and the UK each have at least 200 vendors native to them. They're, combined, those three countries are bigger than Israel.
Mhm.
But there's still a difference, right? Because they're not creating a Wiz or a Sierra or Orca every
Sure.
single, month like Israel does. And it's, because Israel has to sell outside of Israel, right? There aren't any customers in Israel, right?
There are 4,000 cybersecurity vendors in the world. Yet, only a handful becomes a global category leader. And the uncomfortable truth is, talent isn't enough. Technology isn't enough. In this episode, I'm going to be sitting with Richard Stiennon, founder and chief analyst of IT Harvest, the most comprehensive database of cybersecurity vendors in the world. We're going to be discussing what makes success in this industry and what are the differences between US, Europe, Israel, and how capital, talent, and policy are influencing the market. Let's go straight to talk with Richard. Welcome to Scaling Cyber, Richard. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Ignacio, it's my pleasure. Great to see you.
Yeah, I'm very happy that we finally have the opportunity to talk. I see a lot of the activity that you have online, many podcasts, and a great tool like IT Harvest that you have been building over the years. But for those that don't know what IT Harvest is, could you give me like a little elevator pitch? Let's call it that way.
Yeah, sure. Easiest way to think about IT Harvest is kind of a combination of Gartner and PitchBook, right? So we're an industry analyst firm like Gartner. So we've got subject matter expertise in the cybersecurity industry. But unlike Gartner, we track data on all the participants in the industry. So there are over 4,000 vendors. For years, or 6 years actually, I published all of those vendors in a book, which I've stopped doing because turns out in this day of AI, having a list is where you start if you want to, do something with data. And anybody could OCR the list in that book right now and recreate what I have. Now, mind you, it's the thing about this data is it's constantly updated. And this book is a year old, so it's 20% out of date already. So we set out to create a data-driven analyst firm with just the idea that, look at, people need answers to questions, right? Like questions I get every day is how many vendors are in Canada, or how many API security vendors are there? Things that you can't answer without doing the groundwork, doing a ground up, bottoms up uh, capture of all the vendors, and then categorizing them. So we've done that. It took me years and years, thousands of hours to do it. And 4 years ago, we started making it available to our subscribers, which include investors and private equity firms, vendors, of course. They use it for competitive analysis, or better yet, finding OEM partners. Search firms in the UK are one of our biggest segments of users. And then, of
The
course,
UK is very much data driven, right?
yeah, yeah, very data driven. And I'm finding that Europe is. So European VCs are more likely to use our platform than either Israeli or American VCs.
And for me, I think I had like not all the copies of your book, but I have several of the yearbook. I also have the Up and to the Right book on influencing and working
Good.
with analysts. I
Yeah.
loved it. Honestly, it helped me a lot in my previous work at ESET. But when I started to see more about IT Harvest, I was like, this is the type of tool that today you cannot easily get, because you can go and ask, ChatGPT and Claude, okay, how many vendors are here or there, but you don't get the right information, and even if you get it, is not complete. And when I saw snippets of what IT Harvest has, you even go to the level of features, the actual category of the markets, number of employees. There is a trove of information even for decision makers on the end user side to be able to select the right tools for them, right?
Yep. It's really hard. I'm probably like a lot of people. Just this past weekend, launched my first open claw agent
Haha.
running in the cloud and added it to a Slack channel. And what I want it to do for me is, scour the web for new vendors that we don't have, right? Because that's a constant job that we have to do manually. And I found you can't really use, ChatGPT for doing that, right? So, so we've been going back and forth with it. First, I had to answer the question: how do I get it to know the vendors that we already have in our database without exposing it to Claude, which is on the back end of this thing? So it figured it out for me. It created a separate file system, and I upload the data, spreadsheet there, and then it can, query the spreadsheet instead of taking or giving data to Claude. So that's great. Then I kicked it off and immediately started returning hundreds of vendors that are out of business. Right? We've archived them. We knew about
Hmm.
them, but we didn't output it in the spreadsheet that I gave it. So now we know we have to go back and give it all the previous vendors that are archived too. So not only do we have, the biggest database of all the cybersecurity vendors, we have the biggest database now of all vendors that have gone out of business or been acquired.
Of course. And that really, that's really the situation that we are in today, right? I know, like, there is a lot of publicly available information, but it can maybe it's not updated. But really, the differentiator, between like, a proper analyst firm, that can give you value, and what AI tools can give you is really that private, curated data that you have. And especially these days that there is maybe new vendors, dozens of vendors every week. It's unbelievable how many new vendors we have today in the market. Or at least it looks like we have so many new
There
startups
are
coming up
there are
because of AI.
yeah, on average, there are 20 new vendors a month.
Phew. If this continues this way, we're going to have like one vendor a day, right?
There are that many, but acquisitions and going out of business counters that. So every year, like last year, 400 vendors were acquired. That's 10% of the entire industry was acquired. A bunch, about 170 disappeared on me. The websites stopped reacting, stopped responding, kind of thing. Um, so, and then even though I've only added 25 vendors that were founded last year, historically it's been about 240 new vendors every year. It just takes me 18 months to 2 years to find them because they aren't public yet. They're in stealth or not making a splash.
And like, the main, you are a special guest for me or for us here at the Scaling Cyber, because not only because of who you are, but also because usually we're trying to showcase, like, the new cybersecurity innovators from outside the US, from outside Israel, and we're talking with a lot of Europeans in general. That's really the main focus. And that's exactly why I wanted to bring you into the podcast, because with your experience and the data that you have, I would really like to have a conversation about how you see the European market versus the American market versus the Israeli, that is like the source of a lot of the innovators today. And you have all the data, so it's not only your opinion and expertise, but you can even provide like the grounded point of views on this. If you when we talk about these new vendor trends, do you see more vendors coming from a particular region rather than other?
It is widespread. I think the U.S. still has the most new vendors every year. Israel, does crank out new vendors, but they're starting with a smaller set, right? There's only about 280 existing vendors in Israel. There's another 100 or so that have moved to the U.S. And so that continues apace. But Europe is huge, right? Europe is a bigger market than the United States. It's got just as many, if not more, security professionals. It actually historically had a. Um, it's kind of interesting because way back when I started an ISP here in Michigan, the automotive capital, right, of the world, Volkswagen had a big office here, and they wanted to use my ISP to get access to the internet so they could communicate to the home office in Germany. That was it was like they had all these security questions. So do you have, they were wondering about our security, firewalls, we're going to use it for VPN, all this stuff that was totally new to me. And that was, at the time, I used that as kind of my understanding of why the internet, grew up primarily in the US, Canada, and UK, because the rest of the world was, South America especially was like this.
Yeah.
They did not get on the internet, so they didn't need the security stuff because they were ahead of us, right? So with security concerns and all the rest. So that's why we didn't immediately have a vibrant security thing. It's because it was only the cowboys in the United States that would just jump on the internet willy nilly
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
worry about security later. Um, Needless to say, today there are in Germany, France, and the UK each have at least 200 vendors native to them. So they're, combined, those three countries are bigger than Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a difference, right? Because they're not creating a Wiz or a Sierra or Orca every
Yeah.
single, month like Israel does. And it's, because Israel has to sell outside of Israel, right? There aren't any customers in Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like two banks, construction firm, and the government, right? And that's
And
it.
that's it. Yeah.
And they all get up. Every startup gets those customers right away. So they have to move to Europe and the United States, the two biggest markets in the world. Whereas in Germany in particular, well, the UK is like this too. Um, a startup founder doesn't go, "Hey, I need to become a trillionaire, so I'm going to create a big company and take it public." And they don't start on that, right? And venture capitalists don't necessarily look for that either. But they will go, "Wow, my customer who I'm consulting with has a need for multi-factor authentication, and that's easy. I just got to tie it into my phone, a little app, and boom, I'm going to create one for my existing customer." And then they got the customer using it, and they ask the customer, "What do you need now?" And the customer will say, "Well, I've got this problem with logging, and ISO whatever requires me to log all the events. I'll create a SIM for you." That's how it works in Germany. It's like, so it's really hard to categorize German startups, German companies in general, because they they cover the gamut, right? They're all platform players, right? And UK, it's slightly different. They don't, um, somebody will have an idea to start a new company. Quite often, it's a consulting service, and they don't leave their 30-mile radius neighborhood. They just sell to the people that they know and their friends know, and they meet at the pub, and they just stay there. And they've got a good business. They're living in a beautiful country, um, and they're afraid of the regulatory environments outside of the UK, and it's a big hurdle, right? I'm going through the process of incorporating right now. That's a big hurdle, and if you contemplated doing that from the outside, getting into the United States, it would seem really, really scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And this, there are a lot of these little nuisance or details, about the European companies. I worked 20 years at ESET, endpoint security company, not small company, actually one of the biggest in terms of revenue, and the situation is very similar to what you described about Israel for ESET, because the company was from Slovakia. There is not that much market in Slovakia. So from the very beginning, you needed to go outside. But eventually companies like ESET or Bitdefender or even Sophos, they stall. They start to grow internationally, but they hit a barrier. And endpoint security is probably the most global market in terms of vendors coming from different places. But why you think that Europeans, kind of hit a ceiling? Even those that manage to go international, they get to a moment that their growth is not that fast. It stalls.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the antivirus space is a great example, right? Because there's, even after ESET, became global, it still had a Slovakia base, I guess. And that's not as good an example as Panda, right? Which is Panda was like the Basque region of Spain. They owned it. Kaspersky, owns Russia and Eastern Europe. And of course, Kaspersky's got its own issues with expanding
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
globally. Um, but in South Korea, it's On Labs. In Japan, it's Trend Micro. So there's all this. In India, there's Quick Heal. So there's still a regional preference. A lot of it is, just language. You want to. There's a tendency for people who want to buy with what they're familiar, and if they're speaking to somebody in their own language, then they're familiar, and it seems like a better choice than answering the phone from somebody calling from the United States, for instance. So I think that's still the case. Endpoint security in general tends, if we're countering targeted threats, is so ESET is going to see an Eastern European threat before anybody else and counter
Mm-hmm.
it, right? So
Yeah.
therefore, it'd be crazy for somebody in Slovakia to use, I don't know, CrowdStrike or something, whatever. Um, and that's been the case. I know when I was when I left Webroot. So remember, Webroot was a company that just did anti-spyware, which wasn't quite, spyware is not quite malware. It's potentially unwanted programs, pups. And nobody was covering them when Webroot was. And I remember after leaving, I talked to the Japanese country director, and he said, "Richard, we don't have spyware in Japan. There was no Japanese spyware." So, but they never
So
told
what do
that
we do, right?
to, yeah, what we're doing there, which is employing a sales team. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and but for me, like, it's very interesting because when I was working at ESET when CrowdStrike appeared, and I remember CrowdStrike, at the very beginning with their, more like service focus, and they were like talking about the next gen antivirus and whatever, but there was a lot of service focus, and they grew so quickly. Like, it was honestly sad to see how they surpassed ESET because I was there at that time, and I see that like I don't know if it is something in the culture of the Europeans or it's like these local roots or what it is that makes it that the growth they're a little more risk averse. It takes more time to establish. They go kind of step by step, and then you compare even with Israeli ones. They quickly get out of the market. They go to the US, and boom, they grow like Wiz. That's a great example. CrowdStrike is another great example of American company growing extremely fast. You know, when you see the Europeans, do you see any particular sector where they are leaders or they grow faster or they own it more compared to these American companies that grow quickly, take their space and become leaders in a lot shorter time?
Yes, I think in data security,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular, hardware security modules, kind of there's several startups in Europe that are growing rapidly right now. And it's the sort of thing that one would be ignored by an Israeli, ecosystem or a US ecosystem because the perception is it's a completely mature industry, been around for 25 years. And you just go to Thales or, the big hardware companies for that. Turns out that's not the case, right? It's like the entire internet and commerce and privacy depends on hardware security modules. So always an opportunity to innovate. And of course, there's cloud-based virtual HSMs. So you got the Swiss Securosys comes to mind, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they were
Yeah.
locally brought up, and they provided the hardware security modules for the central bank in Switzerland, meaning all the banks, if they want to talk in
They
exchange
need to use that. Yeah.
certificates, they need to use it. So I gave them a really, really good foothold. And hey, if it's good enough for the Swiss banks, then it must be good enough for anybody. So I think that's what they're growing off of. It's great. So that level of, so out of DACH, you're going to see an interest in privacy protection, right? They take privacy extremely securely. They have to provide defenses against U.S. technology companies. So you have to use U.S. technology, right? Because you're going to use Google Cloud or Azure um, or AWS. So you've got to be using that stuff. You can't trust it, right? Because we know that every single ISP back in the day had a handshake deal with the NSA, so they've lost all trust. So you have to build in trust, and therefore there's a lot more interest in that level of communication security and data security and uh, validation that who you're talking to is really you, that kind of thing.
That's actually, that's actually a very interesting point, because it's true, right? If the base is not European, right? If where you operate or where you store your data is not European, there is this interest. Okay, let's put some layer in between. And it's true, like when you look into data security vendors, a lot of them, even if some of them are not originally from that place, they are in Switzerland, they are in the DACH region. Yeah, it's a good point, and it's true. That's an area. You know, now when we talk about like this, I know how the global cybersecurity market tends to be led in pretty much in every category by the US. You mentioned before, like how European vendors are difficult to categorize, and that's something that I notice a lot, like how they try to make up their own product, filling several areas, and then when they want to position themselves, customers internationally, they are like, but I don't understand what you do. Do you
Right.
see this as well? With Europeans,
All the time.
is this like all the time?
Yep.
And
All the time. Yep.
what should they do, right? What should they do different if they really want to become that global leader in a space?
Yeah.
What do you think?
When you think of a a German or a French startup, you think of an engineer leading the company. Engineers love their product, and they've created their product for a specific purpose. So they're not going to it's like their children. They're not going to pick one over the others, and which is what you have to do. You have to, if in order to go to market globally, you have to establish who you are and what you do, and you don't you do that with your primary product. And the trouble is, in a global market, especially in the U.S., there are buying centers for the different categories of products. So the people who buy endpoint security products, the people who would buy ESET, never ever buy firewalls. So if you're an ESET, you can't say, we should stop this stuff at the gateway. Let's create a firewall. You're going to have to start from scratch, right? It's a brand new company. And Symantec failed to learn that. McAfee failed to learn that. Palo Alto is going down that same path,
True.
right? They are a network security company. They managed to transition into cloud security. That's great. But are they going to transition into identity security? Identity people have never bought from Palo Alto in the past, right?
Yeah, that's a
So those
huge jump.
firewalls,
Yeah.
huge jump. You're going to have, so you have to hire new sales teams who have relationships with the identity people. Identity people don't have huge budgets. They've already committed 2 decades ago to use Microsoft for identity. So that's all, so they haven't had to buy anything. That's why we're in trouble, right? They haven't bought the other things.
Yes.
So
They're
yeah.
not used to that, right? It just comes built in.
Yeah. It's just, it doesn't cost anything, right? Other than the 50 people to manage it.
Yeah, because you mentioned that like the founders, I know this maybe this. I see exactly the same. I work with several startups and scale-ups, and then I had the chance to have others here in the podcast as well. And I see when there is not one founder, when there is a combination of them, one which is more commercial, less commercial, the approach to the market is different. There is a company that I don't work with, no disclaimer, but I love the way that they work. That is Before AI. They were the first guest in the podcast.
Really? Cool.
And yes, and they were like Luigi and the rest of the team. They're like 3 founders, and they're doing everything completely different than what any other European does. They went straight to the US first, and more like the Israeli playbook. And do you think that more European companies should have this approach if they want to become global leader, or they need to find a European way, whatever is that, because we still don't know.
Yeah, first of all, I would say Luigi is writing his own playbook, right? I admire. I, I see Luigi everywhere. Somehow he is on the road all the time, and in all the same places I am all the time. He just he's done a phenomenal job growing that company to. I think he's approaching 100 million ARR. What I saw him saying recently. That is a European great story. At the end of the day, there'll be other countries that claim before AI, right? They'll say, well, he's really American, right? That's where all his sales come from.
Sure.
So they won't have that geographic association, right? And I can't, I think Luigi lives in France, and there's some connection to
Yes, he's a very
Dubai
international
accelerator.
person. Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
very international person. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, but I think it's a good example of, first of all, in order for an ecosystem to work, a startup ecosystem to work, you have to have greedy venture capitalists involved. Venture capitalists don't, have vision, and they don't physically change the direction of a industry. But they pour money into what is already working, right? It's just like Wall Street investors, right? If the stock goes up, more people buy it instead of selling it and buying another stock that's going down, right? Which is the logical thing to do. Same in what happened in Israel. Israel, of course, has, you know, uh, now they have a very active defense organization that's constantly under attack. So they got this training ground in their military. They did not have a security industry until three former military people created Checkpoint software with only an initial funding of a couple $100,000. They went public 3 years later and made billions of dollars for the initial investors. That's what started it all for Israel. And every region needs that if they want to be a cybersecurity powerhouse. South Korea right now is just churning out cybersecurity startups. They need that big success in order to encourage more investment. The United States, of course, it gets even more granular, right? It's like, all the big payouts come from California investing. And yet here in Michigan, we had Dual Security sold for $2.2 billion to Cisco. In Atlanta, Georgia, you had ISS sell to IBM 20 years ago for over $2 billion. That created a little ecosystem in Atlanta, Georgia, and Ann Arbor, Michigan still has one. And of course, DC's got quite a few. So that's the second big area in the United States.
Yeah, and that's the other pillar in a way that I talk with several founders here already, like a couple of them mentioning that Europe is missing that kind of middle layer, the successful founders that exited and then invested into the next generation, or even this kind of like platform player that is acquiring others and building a European platform, or let's say larger player. That doesn't exist. And one of the reasons that they mention is actually venture capital. You have the data, maybe you can tell me, but what it feels from here is like the order of magnitude of the European VCs investing in European cyber vendors is even sometimes 5 to 10 times smaller than for a similar company in the US. Is that how you see as well, the data that you
Yeah,
see?
yeah, completely. It's like this discount for investing in European companies. And it's significant. If you look at the realities of doing a startup, $2 million is a great seed round, right? That'll get you to product market fit and positive cash flow and all the rest. For Israeli and U.S. companies, that's like nobody pays attention. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you only
Yeah.
got 12 months of runway there. So if you
Yeah.
don't launch with 50 million in seed, then you're not going to be anything. Which is, it's challenging. I don't I would not know if somebody gave me $50 million to build a company. I wouldn't know how to spend that, efficiently and quickly enough, right? How do you hire that many people? Especially
Yeah,
now when
and that's
would not hire.
yeah, and but that is like correlates very well with like like discussions that I'm having with like several founders. I know when they say, okay, what is one of their biggest challenges? And one of the biggest challenges for them is sales and marketing execution, and it has a lot to do with what are the resources that they can come with. But then when we go to like sales and marketing or like the positioning itself, you have been you have been an analyst for like a very long time. You have seen like the industry grow a lot. And why you think like so many non-US or particularly like European companies, they really don't interact the right way with analysts. They some cases they don't even interact at all. What do you think is behind that? And then what is the role of the analyst on helping these other American or Israeli vendors to position themselves better, right?
Yeah, you're right. The first of all, you're fighting an uphill battle as a startup because most of the analyst firms, even they're very interested in what you're doing, and of course, they're human and they like to see startups succeed. But their business is advising large companies who are all late adapters. And so when they talk to those large companies, they're not going to mention your startup. They're going to talk about IBM solution versus Oracle's solution, even though there's a better thing out there for that particular company. Because these guys are late adapters, and they're never going to work with a startup. But I still think it's still super valuable to always reach out to the large analyst firms, Gartner, Forrester, et cetera, Omdia, 451 Group, and just start a conversation. So at least they know what you're doing. Being mindful that you're educating them on the latest stuff, right? You've got a new approach. You're using an MCP gateway to protect AI from that. So don't forget that
Yeah.
analyst does talk to Palo Alto every quarter. And through their questions and their responsibility to guide Palo Alto, because they're their customers probably, um, they are going to, push the big firms to adopt the startups strategies and technology. So, so there is a downside to interacting with analysts.
But but you see that like Europeans, they have like a different view of what the analysts are for, right? And I don't know if it is because many of the analysts are US based and a lot of their customers, or like a big proportion of their customers are US based, or is it because like they feel that it's far away, or they don't have enough money, or there is not enough expertise. But when you check any of the even the cool vendors reports, like
Right.
these new emerging technologies, the non-American don't exist. And when you talk to them, I don't know, I didn't reach out to Gartner, but you have a cool technology there. Why you don't do it? It doesn't take you much. It's filling a form and and that's it, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the interactions are, free training in how to deal with media, and eventually they'll have to learn how to deal with the analysts. So, yeah, I start doing it as early as possible. I mean, I
They
talk to
definitely need to
people.
buy your book, about
Yeah,
that. And I
definitely,
think I'm going to start
definitely.
to get your book to them so they
Yep,
understand. And, there is actually, there is no magical thing. It's just having another conversation with someone that, is not a customer and is not a channel partner, but is going to help you to actually position your company better, right?
yep, absolutely.
And what talking a little bit about like the present and the future, because with all the data that you have in IT Harvest, you are in a unique position, right? And I see that it's for me it's amazing how active you are also, like in connecting with people, in communicating. Now, what are the opportunities that you see ahead, like for the market, where the market is going, and maybe where the European or non-American vendors can try to start to think to step up a little bit, like.
Well, everybody should everybody should, I don't know, drink more Austrian beer because right, in this past week, like everything that happened in technology came out of Austria, right? So the
Mhm.
I think it's the founder of now called uh, OpenClaw.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Amazing, amazing technology that's just grown and been adapted really fast. I think over 1 million agents deployed already, including one I built over the weekend. Um, and then the Molt book, also Austrian birth of a social media platform for agents
Yeah.
to participate in. There somebody has created a um, Silk Road for bots so they can engage
Mm-hmm.
in illicit kind of stuff. A lot is happening all of a sudden, and there will
Yeah.
be security concerns, and there will be ways to address that. And people are and right today, if you had a $10 a month product that would protect your
That's
OpenClaw
true. There is an
bot,
opportunity right now, right?
yeah, you could just launch that company and sell it. And you'd be a
Yeah.
millionaire next week.
Yeah. It's like in a month and a half.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Or the ESETs of the world could step in and do something like that as well. ESET doesn't have to sell it; they can just make it available for free as a service. So I guess it's that level of staying on the cutting edge, right? So that's because all the entrepreneurs do that, right? Uh, and of course Europe's got millions of entrepreneurs that would do that. So I talk to them about once a week. I talked to a startup in Europe, great technology. The guy I was talking to yesterday in Italy had a unique approach to agent monitoring. I think he really got a great idea, and you should get funding right away. And don't be afraid of going to the U.S. to get funding, and give your local VCs an opportunity. It's kind of funny. I know that for my own service, I get a lot more traction with European VCs than I do
Okay.
U.S. or Israel. I've discovered that in Israel they don't need data because they already know everything,
Yes, of course. And they know everyone as well.
and
It's
they
a
know
small
everyone.
country.
Yeah, yep. That's pretty much true for Silicon Valley venture capitalists as
Yeah.
well. Are you?
Yeah.
They don't use data, right? It's just who they know and all the rest. Um, so that said, that means that if you go to with a brand new idea to a European VC, they may not recognize that the value of.
Yeah, yeah, they are a lot more fragmented. There are some initiatives now, I'm part of the European Cybersecurity Organization. That is really one of the few organizations that are trying to put together European cybersecurity industry. And you can see that the VCs are starting to work together. There are groups there. There is some initiatives about even creating a fund of funds. So there are some things happening, to exchange more information. But it's true. They are very fragmented and the sizes are small, even if they're like very good, like local stories, because, Lovable, speaking about, agents and AI is Swedish. Then now we had Aikido Security that is like also on the using AI for a lot of different topics on securing code that became a unicorn, and they are from Belgium. So there are like good stories. I think that the difference that I see a lot is the language, is the confidence, is like the boldness. I know that
Yeah,
when you compare Europe to other regions, the Europeans are a little more cautious, more technical in the way. But then these outliers come, and they are more positioning themselves in this global language of boldness, confidence that you don't see with many of the other ones. And I wanted to ask you, two more things before we go, and I let you go back to the probably the beautiful weather that you have in Michigan. Now, you are very active on these discussions that are happening all the time about platform versus best of breed. And this is and I agree with you a lot that yeah, there is no such thing as a platform, right? But why do you think that this continues to come back? They're like the Symantec before tried, McAfee tried, many vendors. Then now again we have CrowdStrike and Palo Alto and etc. How did we have like these cycles repeating in the industry, and people doesn't seem to understand that it's very difficult to create like a broad platform that covers everything in this market. How how you see this? to share it with those that don't know that much about this topic.
Sure. Yeah. Um, there's almost a personal psychological aspect to it. From a business perspective, when a company gets very big and outgrows its founder, right? So you will have a technical founder, and they grow really, really big, and now that person's got to talk to Wall Street every quarter during the earnings calls, and so they need that professional heft about them. So the company hires a professional CEO, puts them in charge. They immediately fall for this fiction that people buy products from them because they've established a brand and all the rest. And therefore, all they need to do is acquire a bunch of products and then they can sell them. And they have to wrap them in a philosophy of why you should buy everything from us. And that's where the platform talk comes from. It's created by the marketing team. Marketing talks about it. The CEO gets convinced, he gets sold by the marketing team that what they have is a platform. And then the CEO embarrasses himself by talking about that. And every old person in the industry goes, "Yeah, we've been down this road,
Yeah.
and you better be careful because semantics gone. They were torn apart by private equity. McAfee gone, same thing, torn apart by private equity. Computer Associates, same thing.
Yeah.
They were talking about platforms back in the day. The antivirus space, and a lot of credit to ESET, right, for never falling into any of these traps. They just focused, right? Founder led, and they just focused on what they did. And they never did that. Same with Trend Micro. They made acquisitions, but very, very strategic. Um, but Semantic McAfee, Network Associates back in the day were computer utility companies, and they bought everything that people needed to make their early day Windows machines more effective or efficient. And one of those things was antivirus. So eventually they said, wow, we're selling a lot of antivirus. Let's rebrand as an antivirus company and get rid of the rest of that stuff, which they did.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But they
remember
never
Norton
lost the,
Utilities.
yeah, yeah, they never lost the idea that they should buy more companies to sell
Hmm.
through those, which is, in certain markets that really, really works well. Telecom, for sure, right? You sell, I don't know, radio transmitters for microwave towers, and you buy a company that sells something adjacent to it with the same customers, and you just sell through to those customers. And huge increase in revenue. It's great. Kind of works, but doesn't work very well, right? Cisco's been buying cybersecurity companies for
Everything.
years.
Yeah.
Where's IronPort today? Can I buy an IronPort email gateway server? I don't think so. Um, and can I buy OpenDNS? Well, yeah, but we call it Umbrella for some reason, and you don't know that it's
What is
DNS.
under the umbrella? You have no idea what is really under that
That's right.
umbrella, right?
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah, yeah, but for me, I remember the industry like 30 years ago, right? And it's true, it goes like through these cycles, consolidation, expansion, the new players come and so on. And now I think AI is accelerating a lot of this, but we still talk about like these platforms and so on. Now, where do you think, where do you see that consolidation is making sense? If you don't build a full platform, but you build something halfway. The sectors that are making
Sure.
sense to merge a little bit more.
Yeah, some things have got to line up. You can offer if the customers for your product are all buying another product as well, then you should acquire
Hmm.
that company and combine the functionality. So if you're a endpoint company and people want, yeah, if you're an EDR company and people are buying endpoint control, which is what you deploy to prevent people from putting thumb drives, and USB sticks in, you should buy one of those and combine the two products so they only have one install of a software package. It'll be the same buyer, desktop support person. If you're a network uh, appliance vendor, and this new thing called intrusion prevention comes along, which is done in the network, in line, just like your firewall is, add intrusion prevention. And that's what NetScreen did after acquiring Nir Zook's company, and then eventually got acquired by Juniper for $5 billion. So, and then, so we end up with, yes, there are network security platforms, and yes, there are endpoint security platforms. Maybe there could be an identity platform,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want to create an identity platform, you must own the directory. You have to. That was the first battle, right? And Microsoft won by giving away a shoddy knockoff of an LDAP server for free. And they won. They just sucked the air out of everybody else's directory services. So if you want to enter that space, you have to have your own directory. Okta's the only one who had the guts to do that. And it's a hard battle. So they're suffering right now.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and when we talk about, if your customer, it needs to be really that customer, that person, and not someone else within the organization, right? Because that's
Right.
another customer.
Yeah.
Richard, this has been amazing. I really appreciate that you took the time to talk with me. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Like, like the audience is a mix between professionals, investors, startup founders, and those scaling cybersecurity from outside the US. What would like to share with them that is important for you or for them?
Yeah, for them, you have to be all over AI and understand what's going on in AI because it's changing the entire cybersecurity industry. It'll change it. What it does to cybersecurity is natural and it's going to happen, and it'll be complete makeover of the entire industry in the next 12 months. In 12 months from now, everything will be different thanks to AI. But that's minor compared to what it's going to do to the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So the technology
Yes.
part of the rest of your life, especially, is going to be completely turned on its head, and you have to start paying attention to that. We, as humans, we are not used to exponential growth. We can't grasp it and then project forward. But just know that if you try out an AI model today and it can't answer a question, 2.5 months from now, it'll be twice as smart as it is today. Every 2.5 months. It's 10x every year. That level of change is going to impact you in many, many ways.
Completely agree, and it's crazy. I think we never seen something going
Never.
this fast.
Nope. It took. So I was. I think the first transistor, and you've seen it on Wikipedia. There's a picture of it. It's about this big
Mm-hmm.
underneath a glass dome, right?
Yeah.
First transistor was invented in 1948. The time I was 5 or 6 years old, we had transistor radios in the house, right? Very, very short time frame. It was amazing, right? A lot faster than the first, what is it, Newsom steam engine to
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
where to steam trains. That was almost 100 years. The invention of the transformer, totally changed AI in 4 years. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, the release of ChatGPT, which was only 4 years ago, has changed the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and now who knows where this is all going, but we need to pay attention to those. I think what is very important that what you do is like, you have a unique knowledge and access to data that you have curated over the years, and that's still not available out there. So my suggestion to anyone listening is to follow Richard, pay attention to what is coming out of IT Harvest, and if you're a founder, really read up and to the right, learn how to influence and work with analysts, because it's a key part of what founders need to do. Richard, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to spend this time with you, and thank you for all the insights.
I enjoyed it. Thank you, Ignacio.
Thank you.